Hello everyone, Kirby1 here, and welcome back to Dominion 6, where we will be talking about Asphodel. Asphodel 2.0 as defined by the new patch update, as well as all of the changes that came with Dominion 6. I'll just be going over them as comprehensively as I can, the things that I've noticed, the things that I've tested, and we're just going to sort of use this game in particular as an example. It's just a single player game that I've been running pretty much on and off semi-seriously from the beginning of the release of Dominion 6. This is one of the first games I started, and every so often I'll just come back and do a turn or two because it's not even really that far in, but once you are playing a pop kill nation or a free spawn nation, there's a lot going on. There really is a lot to keep track of. So to start with, I'm going to go over the unit roster and commander roster very briefly. Just the new stuff. So for example, Harpies, same. Satyrs, all the same. Centaurs, Minotaurs, they're all the same as they have been since Dominions 5, and you can use them accordingly. The Black Centaur, same, and again, just basically it's got the same stats as a White Centaur, but the big difference now is that in the latest patch they got buffed to have Berserk 4, and the troops specifically, just as a holdover from Dominions 5 into Dominion 6, basically unchanged in costs. The commanders and the mages are going to get more expensive, but that is relative to the higher income that you're going to get from larger provinces and things like that. The other new sacred that came out in the patch yesterday was the Black Minotaur. And the Black Minotaur is one of only 2 sacred troops in the game that have Berserk +5, the other one being Vanheers in the early age for Vanheim. And so that's pretty impressive, and their stats and cost reflect that. They also have the massive 30 damage battle axe, which obviously with Berserk and it being a two-handed weapon, the damage goes up way higher than that. And if they have trample, they are cheaper in resources and recruitment points than the Black Centaurs, but more expensive in gold. And so I think that just from some preliminary testing, my first impressions are that I would probably still use the Black Centaurs for expansion, but the Black Minotaurs have a great many uses that they can be put to after expansion, depending on the situation that you're going up against. But I think for survivability and because of the gold cost, which is your initial impediment early on, you can't really mass as many Black Centaurs as you can, or Black Minotaurs as you can Black Centaurs, and the Black Centaurs tend to seem to have a bit more survivability from the defense skill and from repel from the longer length weapons, but not as killy as these guys. These guys are much more destructive. As far as commanders go, all of them the same, of course, except for the fact that they are more expensive. Harpies, I think, about 10 more gold than Dominions 5. The commanders also, you're not really going to worry about the Satyr commanders just because you have other commander options available to you, and you really need a lot more undead leadership. Speaking of undead leadership, the Centaur Hierophants and Hierophantides are not different in terms of paths. They are slightly increased in cost, but the other benefit is that because if you have a death path, the undead leadership gained from having a death path is higher, so they can generally lead a few more troops than they could have, undead troops than they could have in Dominions 5. The Black Dryads have gotten a buff. Well, at least I think it's a buff. They got a Glamour path in addition to the Death and Nature. And this gives them a couple of extra fun things that they can do. With Twilight, they can get up to Glamour 2. With gems, they can cast Horde of Skeletons with their death, or with a Skull Staff and things like that. They can get Twice Born and such. But this is probably what I will only recruit if I want to recruit specifically a researcher or like a forger, because the forging things I would do is stuff like Boots of the Messenger, or one path glamour items like the temp gens or the research boosters, or just things like of that nature that I would use specifically the low path mages for in bulk. But otherwise, you're probably going to be wanting to recruit the Dryad Hags on repeat for as long as you have gold to do so, because they are better in every way, including in research and in things like paths for spell casting. But they're Holy 2 as well, so that's also very important for casting things like the National Regrowth spell. The Dryad Hags, like I said, are better, but they're starting to get pretty pricey for 370. That's 200 gold more than just a Centaur Hierophant, so very not efficient for leading troops around, especially since you have Leadership 10, but they can lead a lot of undead chaff at least. Now they've got Nature 2 and Death 1, which will give you a lot of spell options for things like Swarm, Nest of Asps, the National Poison spell, 100% precision spells that I'm not remembering the name of off the top of my head. And then you can also get not Nature 3, so that's actually pretty important, pretty big, that you're not getting Nature 3 ever with these, but you are going to get Glamour 2, chance of Glamour 3, which is vital for your nation if you don't have it on your Pretender. Death 2, chance of Death 3, which is good, but not necessarily vital, because you can get it for recruitables much easier with Carrion Lords. Earth 1, chance of Earth 2, which is also vital because of Earth Boots and cross path with the Glamour as well. And Water 1 with a chance of Water 2, which is fine. There's a couple of things you can do with that, but water is obviously Moss Body, Foul Victors, and Frozen Heart, all sorts of fun things that you can do with them. So this is your Battle Mage. This is your mass-produced Battle Mage that you will be using a lot of, and using probably the most, because your other alternative is Panic Apostates, which are very good, but they're slow to recruit, and you can recruit them anywhere, any fort. So none of your mages or commanders are cap only, which is amazing. Now, the most important aspect that has changed in this recent patch regarding Panic Apostates is this Nature 3, Death 2 guaranteed path. We're going to back out for a second, and we're going to go to, where is it? There it is. Okay. Caran Fortress. So Caran Fortress used to be Grow Fortress, and I, from remembering off the top of my head, was the same price. But the reason it's so vital now is that any Pan Apostate that you recruit is going to be able to cast it right off the bat, no randoms required. That was a massive change from Asphodel all before, even just before yesterday, in Dominion 6 as well as Dominions 5, etc., because if you ever wanted to do Grow Fortress, which you absolutely want to do in every single case that you could ever get a fortress, unless you're taking from somebody else, you had to Grow Fortress with Nature 4. And Nature 4 you don't get natively recruitable on your nation unless you get the random with Pan Apostate, which is 25% chance on a slow to recruit mage, which is now 420 gold. That's very, very difficult. One of the things that did help a little bit is that the Carrion Lord spell that you summoned with did get randoms, which they didn't have before in 5. So that allowed you to have twice as many chances, but then you were spending nature gems to summon them, which was cutting back on your nature gems that you could use to cast a spell in the Grow Fort in the first place. So the fact that Grow Fortress now is Nature 3, Death 2, it means it's guaranteed access, and there's really no incentive to, well, okay, other than like, just preventing rushes or rushing someone else or whatever. There's less incentive to take your pretender awake, and there's much more incentive to go dormant or imprisoned, because you don't have to worry about your pretender having to be the one to cast Grow Fortress. In fact, it's kind of more difficult for them because they have to have the nature death crosspath, which you can get on some of the new pretender options, but Nature 4 was technically easier, and you wanted Nature 4 to Nature 5 anyways to get casting Mother Oak. So casting Mother Oak is probably a little bit farther off if you do that, but still quite doable if you go through construction and things like that and you've recruited a bunch of pans everywhere. So having these paths and that spell on Asphodel is probably the biggest buff to them, than way more than all of the other ones, because of the effect that it had on your nation and the changes it had. So as far as what Pan Apostate does, he also has nature bonus, so he can get up to Nature 4 potentially, rarely Nature 5, but you don't really have to worry about that, because with Nature 4 the Thistle Mace gets him up to Nature 5, and that does everything for you. You can get Death 3, potentially Nature 4 and Death 3, which is quite amazing. But even better than that is Death 3, Earth 1, because then you've got all of the Iron Skin, all of the Temper Flesh things, and you've got Soul Vortex or Invulnerability or all sorts of things like that that you can do. And so as you can start to see, and then obviously water gives you the same moss body and stuff like that, as you can start to see, these guys being size 4 are starting to really get into their own thug potential paths. Now, they're not sacred, but that is easily solved by doing the Twiceborn spell on them, which they can all do, which Asphodel has a Twiceborn form specifically for each of their mages, for both the Pans and the Dryads, as well as the Centaurs, for having transferring into their summonable shapes. So the Pan would transform into a Carrion Lord right here, like so, and then once they are a Carrion Lord who has been Twiceborn and then suicided and turned into this shape, they get the Sacred Tag, which then allows them to be blessed with things like Bottle of Holy Water, or a second Carrion Lord that you actually summoned standing in the same square as him, which we'll be able to demonstrate as a thing that I did this turn as well in a thug battle. And real quick, I'm going to just briefly touch on the summons, which I'm going to pull up a different game for that. But as you can see, when you summon a Carrion Lord, you are able to get these randoms here. So you can get either the Nature one, the Earth one, Water one, and you can also get the Death one. So you have the same random options as the Panic Apostates do. The Carrion Ladies do not have the same as either the Dryads or the Hags. The Hags have all 4 of these options. The Carrion Ladies only have the Death and Glamour options. So you're not really going to see any water random Carrion Ladies or Earth randoms. For those, you're going to want to do the Twiceborning. And then, of course, the spell, the Carrion Centaur just gets you these guys. And if you want any magic paths on them other than the priest level, you're going to want to Twiceborn your Hierophants or Hierophantides, which is probably not super worth it as far as spending your gems for your death gems for Twiceborning goes, because they would be a little bit more expensive than Dryad because of the size difference. So there's that. Now this is the Carrion Lord form, and again you get this by either Twiceborning or by summoning with nature gems. with the cross paths of death and nature. And so the change to the Carrion Lords specifically in this patch is that they have gotten this Carrion Vine attack. And the Carrion Vine is a melee poison version of the Carrion Bow that the Sagittarian Carcasses have, which we'll get to in a second. But it basically it applies this Carrion Seed debuff on the target if they fail a magic resistance check, which if you're applying it over and over and over again with a multitude of different from a multitude of different effects, then it's likely to cause the debuff. I'm going to go quickly into Sagittarian Carcasses and explain that they also have that ability in the Carrion Bow, and then we're going to go into a battle to demonstrate what the Carrion Seed does. So I've got some here. So this is one of your reanimated sacreds that you get both from free spawn and from using the reanimate ability, which for Asphodel nationally is called Awakened Mannequins. And any undead with priest levels is going to be able to do the Awakened Mannequins ability, and it is going to replace the reanimation ability that they had. So for example, if you summon Mound Fiends who have the reanimation ability, instead of reanimating, they are now going to do Awaken Mannequins, and that's because that is a national ability. These guys are sacred, and what they get is a massive number of attacks. So they've got the Sleep Vines, which basically all your Carrions have, and Sleep Vines, just real quick, are a 33 straight damage, not armor negating, not armor piercing or anything like that, but very high damage attack. Not strength not added, magic resistance completely negates, so that's important, doesn't affect inanimate beings. Number of attacks is 3 though, and the attack value is -1, and they have a very, very long length for repelling and things like that. So you have a massive attack density with these guys, because that's 3, 4, 5 attacks in melee for per square, which are size 5. And the Vine Whip is an entanglement ability, but it caps out at max damage of 1. And then the Hoof attack is just a regular attack for blunt damage. The Carrion Bow is the new ability, which it used to be just a Vine Bow for entanglement. Now it's just a straight up buff to the bow, because in addition to entanglement, it has extra effect on hit, Carrion Seed, and the entanglement effect is also on hit. So you don't actually need to damage with the bow at all. You will get entanglement effect, and you will get Carrion Seed effect. But the Carrion Seed effect is magic resistance negates. The entanglement effect is actually quite amazing, because again, it's on hit, so you don't have to damage, but what that means is you get entangled automatically, and then the chance of breaking out of the entanglement ensues. So that's why it's so good. So once you get hit, you have to resist magic every time you get hit by the Carrion Bow. So let's get into now the newest sacred summon, which I have to find, because again, this has just been one turn of the turn rolling, so we're going to have a very, very few of these. But in general, you're going to have fewer of them than you will Sagittarian Carcasses, because the patch notes said, I believe, 1/3 of your Sagittarian Carcasses are going to be these guys instead. It said specifically your Sacred Carrion, which would be these guys, and Sagittarian Carcasses. These guys are really cool. They're different, but they're very good anti-thugs and anti-elites. And they don't have trample like your recruitable Black Centaurs do, which is both good and less good, but probably better good than it is not good, because again, trample tend to wade into the middle of a formation and get surrounded and die. So these guys will instead not do that. However, they're not really large enough to take advantage of the fact that instead of wading into the front of an enemy formation, they wade into the front of your formation and kill stuff that way. Because even if they were size 5, the only thing that they'd be displacing would be size 1 or 2 things, which are just basically your carrion harpies. So what they have is the typical Sleep Vine as well as a big gore attack. Their attack skill is kind of low, but you don't have to worry about that as much just because of Berserker +5. And then they have a Skull Club, which is a extra effect on damage is fatigue damage. So armor negating fatigue damage, which is okay. It's not as good as some of the other on hit effect fatigue damage stuff, but it's still there, so it's fine. I mean, you're doing a lot of fatigue damage on this guy, and then a very, very high damage attack in general. And again, it's a two-handed weapon, so that plus your strength, which is 19, plus Berserk is going to give you a lot of damage. And their protection is so-so, but it's all natural armor, so that can be boosted only slightly by things like stone, iron, skin, just because of the way that those things work. And you'd be better off with something like a hard skin on your bless if you wanted something like that to boost it up higher, and then Berserk boosts it up to just 14 inherently, which is fine. It's okay, but it's not something to write home about. It's just sort of mediocre. So you don't really want these guys to be taking a lot of damage, but things like Undying do really well for them because they're undead. So, and they're not mindless, so they will, I was going to say they will retreat from combat, but they won't because they're Berserkers and they have 0 encumbrance, so they're never going to fatigue out. So that's awesome. They have a use, and since you get them for free, you're not complaining about it, but just sort of, I would sort of keep them and build them up in critical mass until later, and then use them to smash something that you're really worried about. So let's go into a battle to see what that kind of effect looks like. So this is just me going in against the usual AIPD, which is to say a lot but not impressive with an unnecessarily ridiculously large doom stack. And I've just front loaded a bunch of these Sagittarian carcasses, and we're going to just watch one volley of these guys go off. And as soon as it lands, we're going to see a couple of entanglement effects, and we're going to look around. No, no. So these guys all passed their morale saves. This guy. So this guy failed his magic resistance, I should say. His magic resistance effect, and he got this Darkseed Infection debuff. Now this Darkseed Infection debuff lasts on him specifically for the rest of the battle. So you only need to fail one MR check, and you've got this for the rest of the battle. And once that happens, anything that kills you, that kills him, is going to make him turn into a mannequin. Now what's really interesting about this, he didn't get it, but still. What's really interesting about this, though, is that the mannequins that you can get are actually dependent on what dies. And I don't want to say how, because I haven't really looked into that a whole lot. This is sort of my first interaction with seeing how the Darkseed infection works. But again, if you read the text right here, it says, if it dies, it will reanimate as a mindless mannequin. They will serve should they still be present in the battle, and it is infected. But this doesn't go away ever. This isn't like a temporary debuff. You just have to die at some point from anything. The bow doesn't have to kill you. Anybody kills you. You can even die from like friendly fire or whatever, and you will spawn into a mannequin. But what we're really going to be having fun with is watching this guy, the Scorpion Beast, because later on in this battle, the Scorpion Beast also gets hit right here. And now Scorpion Beasts have very, very low magic resistance, so he was pretty much guaranteed to get the infection, which he did. So once he got the infection, we're going to watch couple rounds until he dies. And as you can see, he got surrounded here. And you saw it. It was right there, right in front of your eyes. He got killed, and he turned into a carrion bear. Now, the interesting way this mechanic applies is that the dark seed infection remains, but it's kind of irrelevant at this point. I actually had to thoroughly watch this battle for a couple times just to see if it worked like this, because I was very, very concerned. I was like, does that mean if he dies again, then he just respawns perpetually into more mannequins? But no, you don't have to worry about that happening. He just dies once, and because of the way that this interaction happens, the tag stays here. And I'll show you why. The reason why is because if you go to view log, this is still the scorpion beast. It was the scorpion beast at the beginning of the battle and was fighting in battles. And then right about now, it stopped being the scorpion beast and became what it is now, which is to say the carrion bear. And again, I think the reason for this turning into specifically a bear instead of just a regular mannequin, which we can see happening to other situations as well. So for example, this guy right up front here, he's going to get eaten. And there we go. Turns into a regular mannequin because he's probably human-sized. So Abyssinian infantry died, and funnily enough, I think the attacks keep going on holdover, and so he also gets sideswiped by the bear because he's so enthusiastically killing him that he just hit him one more time. But in any event, like I said, anytime anybody gets killed at any point in the battle with this dark seed ability, they are instantly turned into a mannequin. So yeah, like I said, you just need to fail one MR check as long as you've been getting pummeled repeatedly by these carrion vine darkseid abilities, and then you automatically get a mannequin. Now, what does that translate into post battle? Mannequins are very brittle and most likely to die, so you probably won't see a lot of return on investment from it in general. But this guy right here, this guy was that scorpion beast that died, that we killed and brought back to at the end of the battle. So you will see it happen every so often, that you get guys back, especially probably the bigger ones. And you saw there that he had a lot of afflictions, and we tend to have a lot of afflictions on our guys. I guess all of these guys were actually the ones that were reanimated. Funnily enough, they keep everything that they had, which includes damage shield, but he doesn't have a shield anymore because he dropped it, because he doesn't use weapons now that he's a mannequin. But you don't really have to worry about those afflictions for much longer because all mannequins have recuperation. So these will all go away after a while. You really don't have to worry about how hard you hit them and how repeatedly you punch them in the face, because you're going to get perfectly fine, very happy vine reanimated people by the end of the fight. So that's really cool, and borderline overpowered. I'm kind of wondering like how strong this is, and I just wanted to show you again. This is how many archers I have, and we're gonna take a look real quick. It's turned 46, so this is how many archers I have in one stack. 22 there, 46, so we've got 60-70 archers, and every single one of them, when it fires a bow on hit, forces an MR check, which will then give you the debuff for the rest of the battle that will turn you into mannequins. Hello again. So I'm going to take a brief tangential pause again to go over the specific mannequins that Asphodel is able to get. Most of these, well, basically everything on this screen is all the actual same. We have new sprites for the satyrs, the harpies, the carrion horses, and the minotaurs. The rest is all the same. The most important thing with regard to the abilities of the carrion because their stats and other things are relatively unchanged, is their size differences. So for example, harpy mannequins being size 2 instead of size 1 means their attack density is slightly lower, but they're still the highest attack density in the game, keeping in mind that they can fit 5 to a square with 6 attacks each, meaning that they have a lot of attacks doubled with quickness. And then that also, the size differences also relate to displacement, which affects everybody except for the behemoths, the elephants, because the elephants have trample, and you can't displace other units if you have trample. And again, as a reminder, the elephants have fear, which is very, very big deal for winning battles and spooking people away. So the largest carrion are the bears at size 6 and the horses at size 5. And so these are actually able to displace things that they are put behind. So for example, the bears, if you put them in the back and then a line of regular mannequins in the front, these will tie things up while the bears wade through until they get to the front and start bonking people with their stronger attacks. This might give you a little bit more of an opportunity to keep the bears in like a cluster and fluff them for getting not killed, because they still have very, very low protection, and then giving them regen and stuff like that with the wreath growth spell. The carrion horses can do the same thing, but with harpy mannequins. And since harpy mannequins are not very good at actually killing things, but are very, very good at putting things to sleep, you could do the same thing by sticking these guys up front with a better leader, but and then putting them in like a line formation and having a wave of carrion horses come in right behind them, because they have very, very high combat speed, and pummeling them after getting a bunch of buffs. So just food for thought. And then again, there's the mandragoras, which are basically part of this group right here. This group is considered to be sort of the good chaff, the ones that you're more likely to get with magic scales. Now, in addition to that, you've got the Carrion Furies that you can spawn periodically, but you're going to get fewer of them than you will the Sagittarian Carcasses. And then some of the other things that you can actually get with, not from reanimation or from your Dominion, but from actually killing things. You get these new kind of carrion ogres, and even better you get, well, I say better, but even bigger you get the carrion titans, which you can pick up from killing very, very large beasts, like this particular one I did in a test game. I killed a forest giant with the dark seed infection on him. These carrion ogres I actually see in a few sort of middling range scenarios, so things like pale ones. I actually pick up a couple carrion ogres, and things like trolls you'll get these from as well. So if you're going up against sort of mid-sized semi-giants, if you are able to bring a lot of carrion bows to bear against them, you can probably pick up a lot of these guys, but otherwise you won't actually see them. Now, one other very fun little tidbit to note when I was talking about how they keep their afflictions and they keep their things like broken shields or whatever, they are also the only mindless units that actually can get experience stars, but they're not getting it from their time being mannequins. They keep experience stars from what they kill, so that can be a lot of fun. One last note about these particular carrion titans is that they are actually not mindless. So if you pick up some dark-seeded guys that you kill in battles that are very, very large, you can pick these up, and then you can also, if you feel so inclined, Gift of Reason them with nature, instead of having to do something like Divine Name with Astral. And you get this with full slots, but it's not necessarily better. They don't have very good attacks, bad protection. The only thing about them really going for them is their big hit points, and they also have a fear aura. and they do not trample, and they're size 9. So I don't know, maybe there's some utility that you can put them to that way, but otherwise might not necessarily be worth it. Just otherwise keeping them sort of in your armies to draw soul slays against their big stacks of HP. The Carrion Lords also have that. And now, at the end of this battle, we didn't really get a whole lot of return on investment from that, but that's mostly just because of the kit that I have in particular for these guys that happens to kill everything around them. But as you can see, they also happen to get the Mannequins back because they have the Carrion Vine attack. And Carrion Vine and Sleep Vines are both innate weapons, and so they won't go away even if you double equip your slots as far as magic weapons goes. But we can see how this went in general in a game where I gave this guy Death Gem so he could do Soul Vortex. And once you've got basically Soul Vortex, Invulnerability, you've got Reforming Flesh, your Bless on them, Temper Flesh, Moss Body, Enlarge, anything you want, you can just double stack on these guys because they both fit in a square together. Even if you give, like this guy did, the Amulet of Giants, which increases his size by 1, or if you take a larger Bless, for example. So then these guys are just really, really tanky for having one square together. The funny thing which came up with one battle that I was doing is that if they happen to randomly spawn with their same square paired with a shrub, then they get displaced. So your buff script is not as efficient as it was. So don't really rely on the buff script being like in the same square, because you might get a shrub instead. But it didn't seem to worry them too much anyways, just because of all the oppressive stuff that they have, as well as just going up against random AI chaff and stuff like that in single player. But as you can see, once these guys get into combat, they do not care. They kill everything and are not getting damaged at all, and are in fact over their current initial hit points because of both Soul Vortex as well as my Bless, which happens to be drain weapons from vampiric weapons, because all of their attacks, including the Sleep Vines, which do damage, as long as this 33 damage from the fatigue damage is not resisted from magic resistance, gets past their armor, they just regenerate from it. Plus they have regrowth from the National Asphodel spell. So these guys will delete an unlimited number of chaff, which is all we have to worry about from the AI. So that is just really, really fun. Obviously, there are counters to this. You do have to be concerned about something like Ravenous Swarm, which will hit both of them in the same square. But again, because they are carrions, and look, he lost an eye, not too worried about it, because built-in recuperation. Don't have to be too concerned about that. And if you're really worried about somebody counter-thugging you, sneak away. They have built-in stealth. It's awesome. And so yeah. Those are the kinds of things that you can do with Asphodel these days. Some of the other things that you can do with Glamour related stuff, let's see if I got a group here. So we've got things like, we've got Shadow Warriors, which gives everybody blur. I think I've teched up probably by now to the Army of Shades, which I could do, but I'd have to sort of put more effort into my scripting. Obviously you've got Earth, which gives you Steel Slice Warriors, and I didn't bring gems for it, so it's whatever. You've got Howl, which is slightly nerfed for going into a fort because it won't spawn wolves behind the walls, which I really, really like, and I'm happy for, because that was a little bit silly, but still slight nerf. You've got the Oaken Warriors, which is the new version of the what is it called? Army, the Wooden Warriors, the battlefield-wide one. This is the battlefield-wide one. It's called Oaken Army. Less effective against Abyssia, for example, but good versus somebody but like Scalaria. Some of the other things that you can do with Glamour is Twilight, obviously boosting you up. Phantasmal beasts are a lot of fun, and they can take all of your buffs as well because they are not illusions or spirit form. Displacement, invisibility, you can do displaced warriors. You can do other things like Horrible Visage, which gives dread, and Nightmare Mask, which gives area of effect dread. Aura of Bewilderment causes MR checks for, I believe, a confusion ability of some kind. Vision of Death is a 100% precision glamour damage, false damage ability. And like I was saying before, we've got Nest of Asps, which is a lot of fun because it spawns size 1 serpents, which fit in really well with the rest of your formations and do very, very high poison damage. This Vengeful Vines is a new one, which inflicts the Carrion Seed ability. It's only area of effect 1, and it's kind of short range, so it's fine, but you really don't need to worry about it just because of how many carrion bows you have on your Sagittarian carcasses. Venomous Death is the other one, 100% precision for 25 poison damage. Very, very fun. And you're probably not going to put mass regeneration up a lot. Serpent's Blessing will be good for if you're doing foul vapors and relief. You can do the other typical death spell things with these guys. So things like Rigor Mortis. You can do Darkness, which is really good for your guys because now all of them have Spirit Sight. And Life After Death is so-so, but again, you're going to have so many mannequins that you probably aren't going to see a lot of use for it. Now, the other very important change that you get is lots and lots of free spawn commanders. So you get these guys, Carrion Commanders, which are just satyrs, and they are respectable-ish in combat on their own. I actually had one take on a assassin somewhere and live right here. Nope, not there. That was me teleporting my god, killing something. So they're ungeared. They will do fine in combat. Again, Poison Daggers is not really going to do a whole lot when you have very high poison resistance. And so their stats are fine, and they're not mindless, so they'll gain experience stars. Their leadership is great. Their undead leadership is even greater. So you can do formations with these guys, I think. Let me take one of these guys. Yeah, you can do formations with them, which is very awesome, and you won't get a morale penalty for leading troops. So kind of mid-game, I start using these for basically everything. As you can see, I have an unnecessary amount of these guys in one province, so I can start consolidating pretty much into one group. And then redistributing them, and that's sort of most of my that's been most of my turns, is just sending them out to every single one of my provinces to pick up chaff from everywhere and move them to the front lines. So these guys are very, very fun to have. The other that you get is just free spawn of the Carrion Centaurs, and I don't 100% know the mechanics off of it, but you do seem to get them in provinces with high dominion and in provinces with temples. And then what I tend to do with them is just set them to reanimate and be happy that I got a free reanimator and not worry about them for the rest of the game, because you don't really need them for anything else. They're not actually that great in combat. They don't have the bow like the Sagittarians do. So I just use them to make more chaff for me, which is awesome in and of its own right. So as far as the other things that have changed just in general from what Asphodel used to be like in Dominions 5, is as far as the way growth or all the scales worked, the scales now go up to 5, which affects your reanimation rates as well as your all sorts of things. So growth limit +2 means that instead of being able to go up to growth 2 like a normal nation would, you can go up to growth 4 out of 5. And you also start with a site in your capital, which gives increased growth up by a maximum of 4, which means technically you only really need to have growth 1 on your pretender with your scales, and in your capital you will have growth 5, which is great. I mean, you'll have growth 5 automatically, but you really want it in everywhere just because of the benefits that it gives you for both your income as well as your carrion spawn rate. Now, carrion spawn rate is also affected by a combination of growth and your dominion score, if I understand it correctly. However, the higher your dominion goes, because you are a pop kill nation, the faster your population is going to decline, and that is obviously going to affect you most in your capital. Whereas you can see I'm only able to recruit 2 centaurs per turn now, or 3 black minotaurs per turn, which I'll probably want to actually be doing that instead. Now that is as a result of your recruitment points going down based on your population. So you can also mitigate this a little bit by a couple of ways. You can have a low dominion just starting on your pretender, and you can spread it if you want to by using your regular priests and just preaching wherever you feel like and spreading it that way. That will keep your pop kill low, because pop kill is 1% per candle, which means that this is 10% pop kill, as you can see right there, which means that in general we have the dominion being mitigated by the growth scales as well as just sort of the province scales themselves. So it's not 10% overall, but still very, very bad. And that's how we've gotten to where we are today on turn 46. The other thing is that you can take order scales instead, which will then boost your recruitment points even when you have low population, and that will allow you to get more of the sacreds out of your capital, specifically probably the black ministars, because their recruitment points 20 versus 29, and both of them are very low on resources, so there's very, very little incentive to ever take production on Asphodel. You aren't really going to be able to outpace your resources with your recruitment, or I should say your recruitment points with your resources, so it's kind of not really any reason to have a lot of resources. One other thing that's important to note is that regarding your dominion candles, your dominion strength, and how many you should take, another very big important change that has come over from Dominions 5 into Dominion 6 is that Asphodel has picked up the other traditional pop kill mechanic that Ermor and Lemuria have, which is to get gems from their temples based on your dominion strength, and that would be, in Asphodel's case, nature gems. So as you can see, we have a dominion strength of 11 because we've been building so many temples, and that means we are getting 11 nature gems per turn. Now, back when this mechanic came into play, I think it was actually patched in after release of Dominions 5, but I may be misremembering. In any event, there was a lot of sort of discussion around the optimal number of candles that you should start with and things like that, because again, you get +1 candle dominion strength for every 5 temples you build. So for example, if you start with 8 temples, or 8 dominion candles for your pretender, then you build 5 temples and you will get 9, and you will still be able to get up to 9 nature gems per your temples until you build and yeah, until you build your 10th temple, and then you get 10 nature gems because your dominion strength is then 10. The benefit for Asphodel that no other nation has is that their temples are also cheaper in forests, because that's a thing that they have. Aramor doesn't get that, and Raga, in fact, actually gets fire gems from temples, but their temples are more expensive even. So it's a lot stronger of a mechanic, especially when you pair it with terraforming. Now, as far as the terraforming changes, the way that that has changed, I will actually be able to also showcase with this turn, because we got an event right here. So the way that terrain changes is specifically, once you get to growth 4 or higher, anything that is not a swamp or a highland or mountain province will automatically start turning into a farmland. And so this is going to, oh no, it's a mountain. This is turned into a farmland already. This will go from plains to farmland. This will go from plains to farmland. And once we take that back, or even without having to take it back, it'll also do that. So, oh, and also wastes. Wastes will never transform. So eventually you will start getting a lot of farmlands everywhere. Now, once you get farmland, if you are in growth 5, farmlands will start to transform into forests. And as we can see from this event right here, this province has changed to become a dense forest. And this is a change specifically from this patch. And it doesn't just affect Asphodel. It will affect things like Satis, which there is actually a Satis in our game. So as you can see, we have the massive Asphodel forest over here, and we have the massive Satis swamp over here. And that's basically how the world has been divided, by crazy forest, crazy swamp, and then Scalaria. And the underground used to be Abyssia, and then I killed them. But yeah, the terrain changes to a forest, and then once it changes to a forest, people will emigrate out of a forest because of the terrain type that it is versus what it used to be. Namely, it used to be a farmland, and because going from farmland to forest means that inherently you will not be able to have as many people, sort of population capped in that province just based on province type, it will have some people emigrate. Now, we lost 786, but you can sort of see how it sort of splits the events, the regular events, from where the terrain events are, because you had another unexpected event happen in an adjacent province, as we will go to shortly, where some people arrived, but it was not 700, it was 400, so you do lose some along the way. So this was the province that turned into a forest, and then right next to it, Blackport, is where the people moved to. I don't know if they chose to move to a farmland specifically, just because it's a farmland, but that may be a factor. But in any event, that's how terraforming now seems to work. And I think that it worked on some level, or was intending to work on some level in that way, but it didn't really work out that way, or at least it wasn't as visible. And now you can definitely see every time you get a terrain event, which I think is great, and it'll show you also where they move to, which if it's inside your own provinces, they're probably just going to bounce around a lot from forest to forest. But we'll see. I actually haven't tested a lot outside of this one turn to see if they go farther than an adjacent province, which they might, but again, I'm not sure 100% off the top of my head. So, but that's a very fun thing to know now. As far as the new items goes, we can take a look at those as well. Oops. So, one of the new items is this carrion seed. This does not work the same way as the carrion seed in battles that I was showing you. It sort of does, but it also sort of doesn't. It will turn you into a mindless mannequin when you die, but it will normally cause you to die by causing disease, so eventually you will die. But you can sort of use this to apply disease and this carrion ability to a bunch of people, and then send them into a battle where you cast like foul vapors and suicide them that way, just like you normally do. Or you could perhaps give this to them and then send them underwater and drown them, and the same effect will happen. So there are options, but just like you always would with Twiceborn, I haven't gotten to the point where I've tested it quite yet. I've made a few, and this has just been one turn since the patch rolled, and I just sort of scattered them around. So for example, I'm going to give this to them, and I gave it to another Dryad Hag, and then I'm giving it to a Pan. The other item that you can make, which we'll do before we go on, is I actually don't know, right here. Okay, so you got Vine Bow, which is cheaper now for Asphodel, which is awesome. I think it's half price. And again, you can use a hammer to knock those out for even cheaper. But you don't really need to worry about that when you've got the Carrion Bow, which is just a better Vine Bow. And it's only 5 gems still. So you can get that down to, I think, 3 gems. It would probably be 1 nature and 2 death. And it gives you the Carrion Seed ability. And it's basically the exact same thing that the Sagittarian Carcass has already in its hand. So you can make more of these and sort of supplement it. And I would, if you forge them, you can just give them to your satyrs, your satyr commander dudes, and they can carry them around. In any event, the last thing I wanted to go over that I was just thinking about is Glamour summons. Now, the reason it's so imperative that you get something like Glamour 3 on your nation is because the Glamour booster that you require is either this one, which requires Glamour 3 for your head slot, Gossamer Veil, or can't do it with them because I need the Glamour Earth Crosspath on them, which would be this one, the Mirage Crystal, which also requires Glamour 3, and as you notice, the all-important Earth 2 as well. So this will actually be very difficult to make, and I actually haven't made one yet because it will be difficult to boost to Glamour 3 unless I get something else to do that. So Glamour 3 and Earth 2 will get you all sorts of things that will break you not just into different paths, but also just a lot of commanders and summons. So if you go into Conjuration, once I figure out the hotkeys for it, some of the most important ones that you can get are things like Summon Cave Kobolds, which gives you resources in caves, but also other things. Blue Cap, which gives you the Glamour Earth Crosspath, and then summons more of themselves. And then Gnomes, which gives you Nature Crosspath, and Higher Nature, which then allows you to do things like Fairy Court. And Fairy Court gets you all sorts of things because of the nature of the spell, which you can cast both in cold provinces or in any warm provinces that you happen to own, and will get you different things with different paths. I believe the warm province one, the Sealy Court will break you into air, and the Unsealy Court will break you into water. Well, more water. You can also do things like, if you wanted with water, you can do where is it? Streams from Hades, which will get you even more water and even more death. So that's awesome. But the fun thing about the Sealy soldiers also is that they have cold power and ice protection, which can do very, very well. Not in Abyssia's Dominion, obviously, but will do very, very well if you take cold scales. So they are also very good armored troops with high skill in attack and defense and things like that can supplement your regular forces. So as a brief additional thing that's worth touching on before I end out this video. I just want to showcase the new pretenders, and I'm not going to go into designs or builds or anything like that. This isn't intended to be a showcase on how to play the nation. It's just demonstrating some of the things that have changed or been added. And so for specifically this patch, what we've gotten is a overhaul with both the sprite and the abilities of the Carrion Dragon. The Carrion Dragon now has these 2 Carrion Vine attacks, as we saw earlier, that the Carrion Lord has, and they can still shape change into the Carrion Lord, which then also has 1 attack. And so that's just a straight up buff to them. This is the most Carrion Vine attacks that any unit has in the game. So he will be pretty cool at just going around and bopping people and giving you a couple of extra mannequins here and there. Right next to him is the Worm Soul, and this is a Worm Mage, the same kind of Worm Mage that you can summon with the Worm Mage spell, the Worm That Walks spell. But he also does, I believe, have this additional bonus right here of the Disease Explosion on Death. I'm not 100% sure if the other Worm Mage has that, because I haven't actually made any yet in Dominion 6. But it's cool. It's cool to have a Worm Mage that you could potentially have on turn 1, Awake and stuff like that. He's pretty tanky. He's got Invulnerable. He can take whatever Bless you picked up. He's got the bonuses to Pierce and Slash resistance, built-in regeneration, and he also will be spawning bugs during the battle and stuff like that, explode into the swarm body, and has immortality. So very, very cool pretender to have an option to pick up. And then you've got the Titan Mandragora, which utilizes the same sprite as we saw earlier of the Carrion Titan, but has a little bit better stats. He has one of the Carrion Vine attacks and double Sleep Vines instead of just the one and the fist from earlier, and can take the Death and Nature paths. Plus he gets 2d6 mannequins every battle to fight for him. And then he also has this Power of Death, which is a new thing from Dominion 6, which is fine but mostly thematic. And then lastly, you have the Mother Mandragora, which personally I think is a little bit better, because even though it has lower in nature, it gets an additional Glamour path, which is a lot of fun for a lot of blesses that you would want to use, I think, for Asphodel specifically. And again, I'm not going to go into it. It's just sort of my initial musings and thoughts on stuff like that. Now, what's very interesting to note, and this is not Asphodel specific, I think the Worm Soul, as far as I've been able to tell from going through some of the 100 nations in the game, the Worm Soul is unique specifically to Asphodel, whereas the Carrion Dragon and the 2 Mandragoras Titans are available to all of the Pangea nations, including EA, MA, and LA nations, so you can have those showing up in your games. But they're not available to Oceania, which I think is kind of a bummer, maybe a little bit of an oversight, but oh well, maybe they'll show up later on. That's a couple of things, just short video, right, on Asphodel and some of the fun things that you can do with them now. If I think of anything else, I will do a follow-up video and cover those as well as I think of them, and any additional testing maybe. If I have an important thing happen, I will let you know. And yeah, thank you for watching. Please enjoy the new Asphodel 2.0 and have a good time.